The first thing I noticed was not the message, it was my husband's face. For 10 years, I had known every expression he had, the tired smile after a long day at work, the nervous look before important decisions, the fake confidence he used when he was scared. But that night, when I found the letter hidden inside his desk, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind that makes a person forget how to pretend. I was holding a piece of paper that had been hidden for 5 years. 5 years inside my own house. 5 years while I cooked his meals, slept beside him, raised our son, and believed I knew the man I married. The first line of the letter was simple. She deserves to know the truth about the child. I read that sentence again and again, because my brain refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. The child? What child? My hands started shaking. Our son, Noah, was 5 years old, and suddenly, for the first time in his life, I wondered if the story of his birth was something I had never truly known. But before I could read another word, I heard the bathroom door open. My husband was coming back, and the man who had promised me he would never hurt me was about to discover that his biggest secret was no longer a secret. My name is Emily Carter. I was 34 years old when I learned that the happiest years of my life were built on a foundation I never saw. Before everything fell apart, my life looked ordinary, maybe even perfect. My husband, Daniel, and I lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle. We had a small house with a backyard where our son played with his toy cars. We had weekend breakfasts together, family movie nights, Christmas traditions, the kind of life people look at and say, they're lucky. And I believed we were. Daniel was not the type of man who made grand romantic gestures. He didn't surprise me with expensive gifts or write love letters. That wasn't him. His love was quieter. He fixed things around the house before I even noticed they were broken. He remembered how I liked my coffee. He always filled the car with gas when he knew I had a busy week. When I was pregnant, he became even more protective. I still remember the day we found out we were having a baby. I was sitting in the doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound screen, completely frozen. Daniel squeezed my hand, then he smiled. Not his normal smile. A smile that made him look younger. "We're really doing this," he whispered. I laughed because I was crying. "I'm scared," I admitted. He looked at me and said something I would remember forever. "You'll never have to go through anything alone. I promise." At the time, those words made me feel safe. Years later, they would become the words that hurt the most, because promises mean nothing if someone breaks them when you need them most. The first signs that something was wrong appeared during the last months of my pregnancy. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small things. Things you ignore when you love someone. Daniel started coming home late. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then almost every night. Another late meeting? I asked one evening. He stood near the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. "Yeah, the project is getting crazy." I smiled, but something felt different. "Since when do you stop telling me about your projects?" He looked up, only for a second. But I saw it. That tiny pause. That moment when someone is choosing their answer carefully. "I'm just exhausted, Emily." Then he walked over, kissed my forehead, and started making dinner. A normal husband would have made me feel better. Instead, that kiss made me feel worse, because it felt like he was trying to convince me, not comfort me. When Noah was born, all my doubts disappeared. At least, I thought they did. Daniel cried when he held our son for the first time. Not a few tears. He completely broke down. He looked at this tiny baby in his arms and whispered, "I'm going to protect you." I watched him and thought, I was wrong. I thought pregnancy hormones had made me paranoid. I thought stress had made me imagine problems that weren't there. The truth was, sometimes the people we trust the most are the people who make it easiest to ignore the warning signs. The next 5 years passed quickly. Too quickly. Noah grew into a curious, funny little boy who asked 100 questions every day. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs bark? Why does Dad have more gray hair than you? That last one made me laugh. Daniel pretended to be offended. "Excuse me, these are signs of wisdom." Noah looked at him seriously. "No, they're signs you're old." For a moment, everything felt normal. Perfect. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Because while I was building memories, My husband was protecting a secret. I found the letter on a Tuesday evening. It was completely random. No dramatic music, no warning. I was helping Noah with the school project. His teacher wanted the children to create a family history poster. We needed old photos. I went into Daniel's home office because I knew he kept our albums there. The bottom drawer of his desk was always locked. I never questioned it. Everyone deserves privacy, right? That was what I believed. Until that night. The drawer wasn't locked. Inside were old documents, receipts, and folders. Then I saw the envelope. White, plain, no address, no name. Just 6 words written on the front. Open this if she finds out. My heart immediately started beating faster. I told myself not to open it. I really did. But there are moments when curiosity isn't curiosity anymore. It's instinct. I opened it. Inside was a letter. The handwriting belonged to my husband. I recognized it instantly. And the first sentence destroyed the image I had of my marriage. Daniel, I can't keep protecting you anymore. Emily deserves to know what happened before Noah was born. I stopped breathing. Before Noah was born? My eyes moved lower. You need to tell her about Sarah. Sarah, a name I had never heard before, a name my husband had never mentioned, a name that suddenly existed between us. I heard the shower turn off. Daniel was coming. I had seconds. I should have closed the letter. I should have put it back. But I couldn't, because the next sentence was waiting, the sentence that changed everything. The truth is, your relationship with her was never the biggest secret. My hands went cold. What did that mean? What was bigger than cheating? What could possibly be worse than my husband having another woman while I was pregnant with his child? Then I heard his footsteps. 1 step. 2. The bedroom door opened. Daniel looked at me. Then he looked at the letter in my hands, and all the color disappeared from his face. For 10 years, I had seen my husband handle every crisis calmly, but now, he looked like a man who knew his entire life was about to collapse. "Where did you find that?" he whispered. I stared at him and asked the only question that mattered. "Who is Sarah?" Daniel didn't answer, and in that silence, I finally understood something. The betrayal I discovered that night wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the moment the real story began. Daniel stood in the doorway of our bedroom staring at the letter in my hands. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The house was completely silent. Noah was asleep upstairs. The dishwasher was running. The clock on the wall kept ticking. Everything around me looked exactly the same walls, the same furniture, the same life. But somehow, everything felt different because the person standing in front of me was no longer just my husband. He was a man with a secret he had protected for 5 years, maybe longer. "Where did you find that?" Daniel asked again. His voice was quiet, too quiet. I looked down at the letter, then back at him. "That's your first question?" He swallowed. "What?" "You're not asking if I read it. You're not asking how I feel. You're asking where I found it." His jaw tightened. I had seen Daniel angry before. I had seen him frustrated, but I had never seen him afraid. And that scared me more than anything. "Emily," he started. I held up my hand. "No." The word came out colder than I expected. "Don't say my name like everything is normal." He looked away. That tiny movement hurt more than an argument would have, because it told me something. He knew. He knew exactly what I was feeling. I put the letter on the desk between us. "Who is Sarah?" Daniel didn't answer, not immediately, and that silence felt like another betrayal. "Who is Sarah?" I asked again. He sat down slowly, like his legs suddenly couldn't hold him. "She was someone I knew before you. Before me." Those 2 words were simple, but they felt heavy. "So you knew her?" "Yes." "And you never mentioned her?" "No." "Why?" Daniel rubbed his hands over his face, a habit he had whenever he was overwhelmed. Normally, I found it human, almost comforting. That night, it looked like a performance. "I didn't think it mattered." I stared at him. "Your wife was pregnant with your child and you thought another woman didn't matter?" His eyes closed, and that was the moment I knew. There was more. Much more. "Did you have an affair with her?" I asked the question directly. No screaming, no tears, just a question. Because sometimes when your world starts falling apart, you don't have the energy to react. You just need answers. Daniel looked at the floor. And that was my answer. My chest tightened. "Daniel." He finally looked at me. "I'm sorry." 2 words, 2 useless words. I laughed, a short, painful laugh. "Sorry." I picked up the letter. "You wrote this. You hid this. You kept another woman's name from me for 5 years." "I know." "No, you don't." My voice cracked. "You don't know what it feels like to find out that the person you trusted most was living another life right next to you?" Daniel stood up. "Emily, please listen to me." "No." "I need to explain." "Then explain." He stopped, because now he had the chance he had avoided for 5 years, but instead of speaking, he looked terrified, and suddenly a horrible thought entered my mind. Maybe Sarah wasn't just an old girlfriend. Maybe she was someone who had been part of our lives all along. "How long?" I asked. Daniel didn't understand. "What? How long were you seeing her?" He looked away, and that was enough. I felt my stomach drop. "During my pregnancy?" His silence answered. The room started spinning. I remembered every night he came home late, every time he said he was working, every time I sat alone 8 months pregnant, eating dinner by myself while waiting for him. I remembered defending him, to my friends, to my mother, even to myself. "Daniel." My voice became a whisper. "Was she the reason you were always gone?" "No." The answer came too quickly. I looked at him. No. "Then what was the reason?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "I made a mistake." I felt something break inside me, not because he admitted it, because he made it sound smaller than it was. A mistake was forgetting an anniversary. A mistake was saying something hurtful during an argument. A mistake was not destroying the trust of the person carrying your child. "You didn't make a mistake." I stepped closer. "You made a choice." Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't, because he knew I was right. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Noah's room, watching him breathe. That was the part nobody tells you about betrayal. People think the worst moment is when you discover the truth. It isn't. The worst moment comes after. When your mind starts replaying everything, every memory, every conversation, every moment you thought was real. I looked at Noah sleeping peacefully, his little hands holding his favorite stuffed animal. And I wondered, how many things about my own family did I not know? At 3:17 in the morning, I finally asked Daniel the question I had been avoiding. "Is Noah yours?" The silence was immediate. I turned around. Daniel was standing at the door. His face changed. Pain, shock, anger, all at once. "How could you ask me that? How could you ask?" The emotion in his voice surprised me. For the first time that night, he sounded hurt. "Because I don't know what's real anymore." Daniel walked into the room. "Noah is my son." "Then prove it." He froze. I hated myself for saying it, because a part of me still trusted him, but another part of me needed proof, needed something solid, something that couldn't disappear. Daniel looked at Noah, then at me, and quietly said, "I'll do whatever you need." That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because there was something strange about his reaction. He wasn't afraid that I questioned Noah. He was afraid of something else, something connected to Sarah, something he still wasn't telling me. The next morning, Daniel left early. He said he needed space. I almost laughed when he said it. Space. After hiding a woman from me for 5 years, he needed space. But I let him leave, because I needed answers, not another argument. While Noah was eating breakfast, I opened my laptop. I searched for one thing. Sarah. At first, I found nothing. Then I remembered the letter, the handwriting, the way Daniel reacted. I searched through old emails, old messages, old files, and then I found something, a photograph. It was hidden inside an old folder from 5 years ago. The picture was simple. Daniel standing outside a hospital, and beside him was Sarah. She was holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. My heart started racing, because underneath the photo was a date. The same week Noah was born. I zoomed in and saw something written in the corner. 3 words. 3 words that made my blood run cold. "She is yours." I stared at the screen, unable to breathe, because suddenly I understood. The affair was only part of the story. The real secret wasn't about a woman from Daniel's past. It was about a child. And somehow, that child had been born at the exact same time as my son. I stared at the photograph on my laptop screen for almost a minute without moving. My fingers were frozen above the keyboard. My coffee sat untouched beside me. getting cold. The house was quiet. Too quiet. A few hours earlier, I thought I had discovered the worst thing my husband had ever done. I thought the pain came from one simple truth. Daniel cheated on me while I was pregnant. But now I was looking at a picture that suggested something much bigger. Something that could change everything. A baby, a woman named Sarah, a date that matched the birth of my son, and 3 words written in the corner of the photo, "She is yours." My first thought was the one every mother would have. No, not my child. Not Noah. Not the little boy who called Daniel Dad every morning. Not the boy who ran into his arms after school. I closed the laptop, then opened it again, because part of me wanted to believe I had imagined it. But the picture was still there. Real. Cold. Impossible. When Daniel came home that afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The photograph was printed in front of me. He stopped the moment he saw it. His face changed. Again, that same fear, that same expression. The expression of someone who knew the truth had finally caught up with him. "Where did you get that?" I almost smiled. It was the same question. Always the same question. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "How much do you know?" Just, "Where did you find it?" "Who is she, Daniel?" He didn't answer. "Who is the baby?" Still nothing. My hands tightened around the edge of the table. I deserved the truth. Daniel slowly sat across from me. For the first time in 24 hours, he looked older. Not guilty, not defensive, just exhausted. "Her name is Sarah Miller." I waited. "She was my girlfriend before I met you." I nodded. "Okay." My voice was strangely calm. "And the baby?" Daniel looked down. "Her daughter." My heart stopped. "Your daughter?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." The room went silent. There are moments when your brain protects you. It doesn't let you feel everything at once, because if it did, you might break. That was what happened to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, trying to understand how the man I loved could have an entire life I never knew existed. "You had a child before me." Daniel nodded. "Yes. And you never told me." "I wanted to. But you didn't. No." "Why?" He looked at me, and for the first time I saw shame. Real shame. "Because she died." I froze. "What?" "Sarah died." The anger inside me stopped for a moment. Not disappeared. Just stopped. "When?" 3 years ago. I stared at him. 3 years? I shook my head. "Daniel, you had a daughter and her mother died, and you never told me." His eyes filled with tears. "Because I thought I was protecting you." I stood up. "Protecting me?" My voice finally broke. "You were protecting yourself." Daniel didn't argue, because he knew. He told me everything. The story I never knew. Before Daniel met me, he had been engaged to Sarah. They were young. They were planning a future together. Then Sarah got pregnant, and everything changed. Not because of the baby, because Sarah changed. She became afraid. She didn't want to be a mother. She struggled after giving birth. Postpartum depression, fear, guilt. Daniel said he tried to help her, but eventually their relationship fell apart. They separated. Sarah kept custody of their daughter, Lily. Daniel saw her every weekend. Then he met me, and for the first time in years he felt happy. But he was afraid. Afraid that if he told me about Lily, I would leave. "That's not an excuse," I said. "I know." "Did you love her?" Daniel looked surprised. "Sarah." I nodded. He thought for a long moment. "I loved the person she was before everything happened." That answer hurt, but strangely, it was the honesty I had wanted. "Then why did you cheat on me?" That was the question I still needed answered, because even if there was more to the story, he had still betrayed me. Daniel looked away. "Because Sarah called me." "When?" "During your pregnancy." I felt my stomach tighten. "Why?" "Because Lily was sick." I stared at him. "What do you mean sick?" "She needed surgery." The room became silent again. Sarah had no one else. Daniel rubbed his eyes. "She was scared. She called me because Lily was my daughter." "And you hid it from me?" "Yes." "Why not tell me?" "Because I knew how it looked." He looked at me. "My wife is pregnant, and I'm secretly meeting my ex-girlfriend." I hated that he was right, because it was exactly how it looked. "But I didn't sleep with her." I froze. "What?" Daniel shook his head. "The affair wasn't what you think." My anger returned. "Then what was it?" He reached into his bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table. Inside were hospital records, messages, documents, proof. I read through them. Slowly, the truth unfolded. Daniel had not been meeting Sarah romantically. He had been helping her with Lily's medical care, but he had hidden it because he was afraid, and that fear destroyed everything. Then why did the letter say I needed to know about the child? I asked. Daniel looked down. Because Sarah wrote that. Why? He was silent. Then he said, because she wanted you to know about Lily. I looked at him. Why would she care about me? Daniel took a deep breath. Because before she died, Sarah asked me for one thing. What? She asked me to promise that Lily would never feel like a secret. My eyes filled with tears. Not because I forgave him, not yet, but because suddenly Sarah wasn't the villain I had imagined. She was another broken person who had made mistakes. A week later, I met Lily. She was 7 years old. She was shy. She stood behind Daniel when she entered our house. I expected anger, jealousy, something. Instead, she looked at Noah's toys and whispered, "Do you think he'll let me play with him?" That question destroyed me, because she wasn't a threat. She was a child who had lost her mother, a child who had spent years being kept separate from a family she never asked to be part of. Noah looked at her, then held out one of his toy cars. "You can have this one." Lily smiled, and in that moment, I realized something. The biggest secret in my marriage wasn't that Daniel had another woman. It was that fear had made him hide the people who needed honesty the most. Did I forgive Daniel immediately? No. Some wounds don't disappear because you understand them. Understanding is not the same as healing. Trust had to be rebuilt, slowly, day by day. But I made a decision. Not for Daniel, not because of guilt, because children shouldn't carry the weight of adults' mistakes. 5 years later, our family looks different. Not perfect, different. Daniel still struggles with his fear of difficult conversations. I still struggle with trusting silence, because silence was what hurt me the most. But now we talk, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Looking back, I used to think betrayal always had one face. A villain, a liar, someone who didn't care. But life is more complicated than that. Sometimes people hurt you because they are selfish. Sometimes they hurt you because they are afraid. And sometimes the truth you discover is painful, but still better than the lie you lived with. The letter I found that night changed my life. I thought it would destroy my family. Instead, it forced us to finally become honest. Because the strongest families are not the ones that never break. They are the ones brave enough to rebuild after everything falls apart. What would you have done if you discovered your partner had hidden a child from their past for 5 years? Would you have stayed and tried to rebuild trust, or would the betrayal have been impossible to forgive? Share your opinion in the comments. I'd love to know how you would handle a secret like this.